How much information can our brains process at once? Let's think about when you drive a car. You are processing the road conditions, the other vehicles around you, and the signs and signals. How about when you walk down the street? You're constantly taking in information about your surroundings, such as the people and objects around you, the sounds you hear, and the smells you smell. Our brains are in fact bombarded with 11 million bits of information every day, which sounds like a lot of information to process, right? To make sense of it all, our brains unconsciously categorize people and situations. This helps us to simplify the world and make it more manageable. However, it can also lead to unconscious bias. Hi everyone, welcome to the course If You Have a Brain, You Have a Bias, where we will explore unconscious bias, also referred to as implicit bias, and learn about the connection of our brain and the inputs from external factors to our beliefs, thoughts, and actions. In order for our brain to manage the number of stimuli our senses constantly feed us, it goes on autopilot to determine what and how to respond at the subconscious level. Our brain only becomes responsible for consciously processing about 50 bits of information per second. The unconscious brain takes care of the rest. When your subconscious is in control, you might behave, take actions, or make decisions based on your brain's biases. These unconscious biases can be difficult to identify and overcome, but it's important to try because they can have a negative impact on our interactions with others. Let's think about how this process works with people. We often make judgments about people based on our preconceived notions about them. These preconceived beliefs and attitudes are the foundation of what creates biases. But what is a bias? It's when we have a prejudgment in favor of or against the person or group that impacts our attitudes, behaviors, and actions. These biases can be based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, age, or other factors. Biases are considered unfair because they create conditions of inequity by providing one group an advantage at the expense of another. For example, let's say I believed men were better at science, technology, engineering, and math, also referred to as STEM. This would be my bias. However, what if I didn't know how I believe this? But how is that possible? Let's explore how unconscious bias is formed. I might not realize this is my belief because I've never consciously thought about it. But all of my high school STEM teachers were male. I had mostly males in my STEM classes. Extracurricular STEM programs were geared towards boys. My science and math textbooks were authored by men. And even my mother encouraged my sister to be a teacher and steered me to become a doctor or engineer when we were growing up. I might not have ever consciously thought men are better at STEM, but my environment surely reinforced that false narrative. All the messages that were fed to my subconscious from family, friends, my social circle, the media, or people of authority validated the notion that STEM was meant for boys. And if it was meant for boys, they must be better at science, right? Do you see how easily our brain can be influenced when hearing something that is stated as factual, even if it's stated one time? Especially if the person delivering the message is a person of authority or a person you trust. Let's tie this back into the scenario about STEM. If you were to consciously ask yourself, are males better at STEM? You might initially say no. But with seeing mainly males in STEM positions, reinforcing narratives, or hearing people of authority reference males in STEM careers, you might subconsciously begin to believe that. Yes, STEM careers are more geared towards males. But remember, our brains are functioning at the subconscious level based on preconceived notions from the 11 million bits of information that we process daily. So guess what? Now I have a bias that is in fact going unchecked because I don't even know I have it. Now, let's bring this example home. Imagine I work for a large tech company as a software recruiter. Because of my implicit bias, which I don't know I have, I'm probably more likely to hire men because I already believe they are better suited for the work. This course is called If You Have a Brain, You Have a Bias because implicit or unconscious bias is automatic and unintentional thinking pattern each of us operate in and affects our views, judgments, and decisions. Most of us don't recognize our own biases and have the best intentions when we interact with others, but our deep-rooted biases can get in the way. It's a function of biology, based on our brain's natural ability to make categorizations and associations. Our brains have been influenced by a flawed society in which racism, sexism, classism, ageism, ableism, and other forms of discrimination exists and impacts our beliefs and actions. Although some biases might be harmless, others can lead to false assumptions or discrimination toward people. So, if categories and associations are part of our brain's natural way of functioning, you might be thinking, there's nothing I can do about it. But there is. Think about your brain as a computer and the information and inputs you receive as the software. If the software is flawed in its design and produces inaccurate data, the computer will simply run the software as it was designed. The same way our brains will process the information we receive, even if it is flawed or inaccurate. This is because our brains are not perfect. So when we receive flawed or inaccurate information, it can lead to us making incorrect decisions or forming inaccurate beliefs. Hence, if you have a brain, you have a bias. Let's go deeper into how the brain processes information and see how easily we react based on our biases. I want you to imagine that you're about to board a plane. You don't have a fear of flying, but it's also not your favorite activity. As such, you've gotten into the habit of peeking into the cockpit before takeoff. Just as you cross the threshold onto the plane, you turn left and take a look at the pilot. Who do you see? Describe that person's race and gender that you most often see as a pilot. Did you say a white man? Most people would. But why is that? Research at 2022 shows that there are over 32,861 pilots currently employed in the United States. 29.3% are women, while 70.7% are men. Also, the most common ethnicity is white at 81.5%, followed by Hispanic or Latino at 7.2%, Asian at 2.8%, and lastly, 2.7% identify as Black. So over time, because of what we consistently see unconsciously, our brains has been trained that white men are the most likely identity group to be pilots. And our brain begins to then operate off this assumption and categorization and then validates that the norm is that pilots are white men. So when you walk on the plane and see the pilot is not a white man, you might have an unconscious thought or reaction. Let's say the pilot is an Asian woman. You might unconsciously think, I haven't seen an Asian woman flying a plane before. Then have an uncomfortable feeling in your gut and not realize it's associated with you being uncomfortable with her identity. In his book Thinking, Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman describes a framework for how our brains work efficiently. He calls this framework the System 1 and System 2 model. System 1 is our fast thinking system. It is automatic, intuitive, and effortless. It is responsible for our gut reactions and snap judgments. And this is where our unconscious thoughts lie. System 2 is our slow thinking system. It is deliberate, controlled, and informed. It is responsible for our more complex thoughts and decisions. Kahneman argues that System 1 is our default system. It is always running in the background, taking in information and making decisions. System 2 kicks in when System 1 is overloaded or when we need to make a complex decision. Our fast-thinking system, or System 1, processes most of our associations about people. Our fast-thinking systems uses easily available inputs to make associations, such as physical characteristics and easily identifiable social groups as context cues, which can be helpful in making quick decisions. But it can also lead to implicit biases. If what you know about a person or social group consciously or unconsciously is based upon stereotypes and prejudices, your brain will end up reinforcing the negative narrative, creating a negative bias. Let's test your fast-thinking brain. I'm going to make a statement, and I want you to say the first thing that comes to mind. Ready? Sports cars are meant to go. Did you say fast? If you did, you are like most people who automatically associate sports cars with driving fast. This may feel like a harmless association, but if you are a police officer responsible for patrolling the road and have a bias that sports cars are more likely to go fast, the officer may unconsciously be watching sports cars more closely to look for speeding violations. And if you are the owner of a sports car, you may be feeling more targeted by police when driving. Do you get the connection? Thinking about the same scenario, let's replace the sports car with African American males. If a police officer has an unchecked bias that African American males are more likely to be engaged in criminal activity, then they will be more likely to be targeted by police. This is not a fictional example. A 2019 study by the American Civil Liberties Union found that Black and Hispanic drivers were more likely to be stopped by police than white drivers, or they are more likely to be racially profiled. This is one example of how bias, left unchecked, whether conscious or unconscious, has the potential to have negative impacts on others. So, how do we check our brain? Let's go back to System 2, our slow brain thinking. When we slow down and use our slow thinking, we can think more rationally about people and make measured decisions based on reliable information. We can question the narratives we've been fed and the experiences we've had or witnessed. But for us to engage in slow thinking, we have to utilize our consciousness, which requires us to question the information and inputs we receive. Here are a few strategies that can help you tap into System 2, slow thinking. 1. Don't rely on your gut feeling alone. 2. Seek out information from a variety of sources to get a more complete picture of the situation. 3. Talk to people you trust and get their input on your decisions. 4. When you encounter someone who is different from you, challenge your assumptions about them. Ask yourself why you think the way you do and whether there is any evidence to support your beliefs. 5. Be willing to learn about different cultures and perspectives. This will help you to understand why people think and behave the way they do. To move into a state of more conscious awareness and in recognizing biases, you must be intentional. How? First, by recognizing what your blind spots are. Look at the worksheet exercise titled Identities to Explore. In this exercise, you will discover some of your blind spots, which are where the associations and categories that were formed in your brain about people may be based off stereotypes, prejudices, or false information. The worksheet has many different identities in various categories. I want you to place a circle around any identity or social group that you don't know enough about to feel comfortable with them. Place a star around any identity that you don't feel comfortable socializing with or have a negative experience or heard negative stories about currently or in the past. And highlight any identity that you are not comfortable being around, possibly because you are unsure of how they will respond to you. All of those represent possible blind spots. None of us are immune to having some of these negative biases, but we can intentionally shift our perspectives about people. We do not have to accept negative narratives we've been fed or stereotype people because of experiences we've had with one or a few. We can choose to change our perspective. The identities you noted on this worksheet are opportunities for you to explore more about them using your slow brain thinking. These are opportunities for you to look to educate yourself about the positive aspects of communities of people who hold these identities and challenge your long-standing beliefs because of what's been embedded into your brain by your family, your social circle, the media, and other influences. A strategy we previously mentioned to help you engage your slow brain was to get input and talk to others. But who you talk to matters. If everyone you might talk to thinks like you do, acts like you do, and makes the decisions you would make, then you might as well be talking to yourself in the mirror. Turn to the worksheet, My Inner Circle, and let's explore your network of people that you choose to associate with. Think about the top 5 people outside of your family circle or co-workers that you interact with. What are their identities? What is their ethnicity? Their gender, age, and sexual orientation. Take a few minutes and complete this exercise. Who are the people in your inner circle? Do they look more like you or less like you? If they look more like you, that's often called similar to me, like me, or affinity, bias. We tend to surround ourselves disproportionately with people who are similar to us. And when we keep ourselves within our familiar bias, we fail to expand our circle and begin to learn more about people who are different than us. To address our implicit biases and make our actions and behaviors more inclusive, we can correct our brain systematic errors and practice slow thinking as we evaluate our thoughts about people we're making decisions about. Both changes take time. Being being intentional and requires a change in habits. Today, I challenge you to push past the natural tendencies of your brain's thinking patterns that uphold your biases and explore people who are in your blind spots. Proactively look for positive attributes about people that you are uncomfortable with or don't know enough about. And when you find yourself allowing your biases to creep in, challenge yourself by saying, I will challenge the narratives and experiences that have created my biases, and look at people as individuals. You might be surprised at how you can begin to shift your perspectives and biased thoughts.